I'm Antonietta Romano. I am a math teacher at the Scientific and Linguistics Lyceum of Scalea. The activity I planned is quadratic equation, and it was taught for my third linguistic class, that is a class composed of 24 students of 15-16 years old. These students are facing for the first time CLIL and CLIL with math. The aim of my activity is that students have to learn how to solve real-life problems using quadratic equation, but this aim was subdivided into four small aims. The first one is I want my students learn what is a quadratic equation. The second one is which are the methods for solving quadratic equations. Then they have to learn how to solve problems with quadratic equation. And at the end, I want my students to design a map where to fix the results they got and try to write second-degree problems to be solved by their peers. With learning designer, I find very easy to plan this activity because it was very helpful in dividing the phases and collecting activities, resources, times. So it's very easy to plan lessons with this tool, I find. As you can see by the pie chart, from the pie chart, the activity I use for this lesson are the 22% production activities, for 12% acquisition activities, for 16% collaboration, 80% discussion, 8% inquiry, 31% practice, and 22% production. The phases I planned are four, and each of them lasts 60 minutes. The first phase is the preparing phase. I tried to balance all the four skill activity. I try to plan activities for all the four skills: listening, speaking, writing, and reading. The first activity is a listening activity. I introduced with a video taken from YouTube. That is a video concerning how to solve quadratic equation using quadratic formula. I used this video because in 8 minutes the teacher explains very well which is the method for solving all the kinds of second-degree equation. But what I want with this video is that my students are introduced to the academic language of quadratic equation. In case during the watching of the video I see my students have problem in understanding, I can activate the subtitles to help them, the English subtitles to help them. The second activity after the video is a writing activity. I ask them, divided in group of 4, to write down 5 academic words they got watching the video. And of course they have to find these words on a dictionary for understanding the right meaning. And after that I also ask them to find out the correct definition of a quadratic equation. But because I'm almost sure it's hard they reach the proper definition by watching the video, I introduce a written activity, a list of 3 activities. In this exercise, I introduce vocabulary and the definition. The first exercise is a fill in the gap exercise, and each student choosing the words among the listed ones are correct in filling the gaps, at the end they have the correct definition of the quadratic equation. The second exercise is matching the right sentences with the row. They have to link the sentence in the first column with the ones in the second one and write down in the table the proper linking. At the end also of the exercise 2, they have again the definition and something explaining which is the quadratic formula. In the third exercise, I ask, using the haptic of embodied writing, to write the full sentences of the exercise 2, because writing reinforces students' definition learning and through this simple copy exercise. After they finish the exercise, I ask to cooperate and compare the exercise's solutions. So they have to speak. There is a little speaking among them to check for the proper definition. At the end of this activity, most probably they know what is a quadratic equation and which is the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equation. The operating phase is mostly a phase where they have to practice what they have learned. So for this phase, I used a very nice site that is Math is Fun, where they can explore the quadratic equation. In this site, they find a graph solution for each algebraic expression is on the left. By simply moving the sliders, they can check which is the value they can get when, for example, b is -1, c is positive, what's happened if a is negative, and so on. So it's the first approach to a quadratic equation in the algebraic form and in graph form. Next, they learn to solve practically a quadratic equation by factoring. They know factoring because my students finished to studying factoring, and then now here they have to apply to solve quadratic equation. And they can check on the site for exercises, and also at the end there is another test asking to solve quadratic equation by factoring. The other activity is how can they solve quadratic equation completing the square. Is another method for solving a quadratic equation that is very easily explained on the site, so they can first read and then also they can test what they have learned, because at the end of the page there are examples and exercises they have to do. So when with the exercise it's your turn, they can understand what they have learned and read in the page. The other activity at the end of the completing the square activity is the activity concerning how to solve an equation through the quadratic formula, and again they have the quadratic formula studied by watching the video, by writing the definition, and so on. And at the end of this activity, they can test how to solve interactively an equation with the quadratic equation solver. So they go on site, they just click on the value, they can give the value they want, and they can check for the solution and the graphical aspect of the equation. They can check for the roots, which is the sum of the roots, the product of the roots, and so on. At the end of this activity, they can now try to solve the first real-life problem I've prepared for them. It's Thomas' problem. Thomas is a student who must plan the bookcase of his room, and the dimensions of the room are given, and also we knew that he needed a free space in the room, and that the bookcase must be not bigger of 60 centimeters. With this data, supported by teacher and also by the picture and the teacher, they learn that for solving the problem they have to study the area of the two rectangles. And so in the page 2 and 3 there is the solution of the problems, but before they are required to discuss in group and share the results. In the restructuring phase, students they must test themselves online. This part can be done in classroom with their own tools, with smartphone also, and the test is an interactive test available on the IXL site. They just with paper they just solve the equation on their own paper and then put the solution inside, getting back the result if they are right or not. In the other part of the activity, they have to reason on a map, in Instagram map, resuming all the key concepts of a quadratic equation. So they can discuss what is an equation, they can, for example, check for what is a root, or they can check about what is a factor, and so on. And after discussing, they can also clarify some doubt and ask to the teacher or their peers for some other explanation. After the map studying, they have to write in group a list of exercises and problems to give to their mates. So they are divided in group of 4, and each group has to write a list of 3 exercises and problem. They can also check for the problems and exercise on the internet, and each group receives a task, and they have to work together for their solution. At the end of this activity, they just discuss if they found some difficulties, if they how to evaluate the mates' assignments. So they discuss about which criteria to be used, which rubrics to be written for evaluating group works. At the end of the restructuring phase, there is another phase, the assessing phase. The first part is an assessment of the previous group tasks by each groups. So they discuss about the results, the reached results. After this, the students share a common procedure to solve a second-degree problem. So they have to fix the steps that are necessary to solve a real-life problem, and after that, the teacher gives them a real-life problem to solve. They can find the manhole problem in an online book, but in case I'll show them, in case the internet is not available, I'll show the problem on the limb, and so they start to work in group about this problem. After that, one student is chosen by the class to explain which is the problem solution, and so the debate starts and there is a speaking phase. During this activity I try to balance lexical density balancing between content cognitive demand versus language cognitive